Sports. What do you think of when you hear this word? Most of you probably think of words such as athletes, money, action, and so on. But what about the other side of the page? The darker side of the sports world. Crime. Crime plays a major role in the sports world and has for hundreds of years. But before we can talk about the present, let's dive back to the past to where it all started. Sports have been around for thousands of years, and we always see the good, but are never truly shown the bad. From the current day all the way back to as early as 700 BC, there have been organized sports around different parts of the world. In the early days, the ancient Greeks introduced the world to sports such as wrestling, foot races, and javelin throw. These sports were held at annual events, and nearby countries would send their best athletes to Greece in an attempt to win the events. These events would become more popular and would eventually be given a name, the Olympics. Around the year 1700, team sports would begin to make their appearance in the Olympics, and this would later evolve into modern-day sports we know today. As these teams became more popular and more money flowed into the sports world, issues began to arise. Players began to make money playing in these sports, and with money comes power. In recent years, we have begun to see this abuse of power become more and more of an issue as the popularity of sports becomes bigger. Superstar athletes have been able to use this power to either reduce or fully revoke the punishment that a normal civilian would have gotten into a lot of trouble for. Now you may be asking yourself, why should I care about this? I'm not a professional athlete, so why does it matter? And the truth is, you may not care, and that's fine. But take a second to think of all the young athletes who look up to these professionals who are doing these wrongs. As a kid, you grow up watching these players, and when you see one of these crimes happen with such a light punishment, you begin to think that you can do the same things and not get into trouble as long as you're playing at this elite level. For instance, players such as Deshaun Watson have faced recent heat over this topic of crime. Watson is an NFL player who currently plays for the Cleveland Browns. During the offseason, Watson was accused of sexual assault by around 25 different women, and most of which were proven to be true. To the normal person, this would have been a large fine along with jail time to go with it. Watson was fined $5 million, which may sound like a lot of money. However, Watson's contract lists that he makes $46 million a season, and in addition to this, he got a $44 million signing bonus this past offseason, which means that he paid $5 million of his $90 million that he made this year alone. In comparison, if you made $100K in a year, you would have been fined just around $5,000. In addition to this, Watson would face no jail time and would be given a measly 11-game suspension. To explain how messed up this is, the normal punishment for a singular sexual assault case is a major fine along with 10 to 15 years of jail time. Not to mention, I said singular. In Watson's case, we are talking about over 20 different women. At the time of you watching this video, Watson will have served his suspension and played his first game. About a week ago, a press conference with Watson was held, and when the topic of the suspension arose, he had this to say about it.
While you were away, what did you learn about yourself during that time, and how do you apply that to now and going forward?
I respect your question, I understand, but that's more in that phase of clinical and legal stuff, and I've been advised to, stay away from that and keep that personal.
These differences in punishment don't just happen between the pros and everyday people. There are these same issues even with the athletes compared to one another. Calvin Ridley is a perfect example of this. He is a wide receiver who plays for the Atlanta Falcons of the NFL, who has recently gotten into some crime-related issues as well. Ridley was given a full season suspension, which is the equivalent to 17 games, for the crime of betting on a professional game that he was a part of. Betting is a massive part of sports these days, and people can make a lot of money off of betting on certain games and players. However, it is stated in all rulebooks among all sports that a player cannot bet for or against their team. But he got his suspension, and he was fined. So it's all good, right? Wrong. Take a second to think about the two players I've spoke about so far. Deshaun Watson gets an 11-game suspension for sexual assault accusations from 24 different women, and Calvin Ridley gets a 17-game suspension for betting on his own team to win the game. So basically, what the NFL is telling us is that it is worse for you to bet on your own team's victory than to sexually assault someone. Something about that just doesn't sound right to me. Now, obviously, not all of you are diehard football fans like Jack and I, and most of you probably didn't know the two players I just spoke about until you watched this video. However, these two are not the only ones in this position. Over 200 other athletes across the sports world have gotten into crime-related issues just like these in just the past decade alone. Some of the world's biggest stars can be included on this list. Patrick Kane of the Chicago Blackhawks in 2014 was accused of beating up a woman in his hometown of Buffalo. The accusations would never be proven true or false, as the court never dove deeper into Kane's case and slid it under the rug instead. Felipe Vasquez plays in the MLB for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and he would eventually be proven guilty of 10 sexual assault cases on children, along with the beating up of many of those children following the assault. He would face 3 months prison time and then be suspended for the following season. However, he was not fined nor punished further than those 3 months. Floyd Mayweather has been proven guilty on multiple crimes of abuse towards his wife over the course of his boxing career. However, the biggest punishment he ever faced was 90 days of prison time, which was eventually lowered to just around a month. This punishment also included no fine or further punishment. In addition to these three, there have been hundreds more, and that is just on the topic of men's sports. Women have also had their fair share of crime-related issues over the years. However, their situation is a little different from the men. Many of them have actually been over-punished for things they have done wrong. In 2009, Caster Semenya was accused of taking steroids and cheating in the 800-meter track and field events. These accusations would eventually be proven false, and the reason for her very masculine build is a condition called hyperandrogenism. This condition causes a very small percentage of women to have a significant increase in testosterone levels and causes this more masculine style of build. However, the Olympic Committee was not satisfied with this decision and would still not allow her to compete in the 2012 Olympics, saying that it gave her an unfair advantage against the other women. Another huge example of this was when Russia was banned from the Olympics back in 2018. Many of the athletes were banned from those Olympics specifically for using performance-enhancing drugs. However, 6 women from the women's ice hockey team were not only banned that year, but were banned for life, all because they had taken these steroids at least one other time in their life. For 5 of these 6 women, the other instance was around a decade prior. All of these athletes, along with many others, have gotten into issues related to the law, and many of them have not been properly dealt with. Whether it is an under or over punishment, it is still not good for the sports world. When one of these crimes happens, the news spreads fast, and this spread causes a major effect on 2 groups of people. The first group is one that I mentioned earlier in the video, and is most likely the cause of the increasing in crime. Children. And no, I don't mean children are committing crimes. However, imagine back to when you were a kid. You have all sat down and watched a sports game at some point in your life, and you most likely found it entertaining. But behind that entertainment, there are many unspoken issues, and to the average viewer, they may not matter. But to a young athlete who is a diehard fan of these sports, many of them see these issues. And as sad as it is, many of these kids follow in the ways of these crimes, thinking that it is okay due to the lack of punishment given to the athletes. The second group affected is the organizations that these players play for. When a crime like this occurs, the organizations are left with a choice. Let the crime go through and lose one of their valuable players, or they can do their best to hide the crime so that their star player can keep playing. Unfortunately, many of these organizations choose that second option. Due to this decision, these crime rates will continue to increase, and there will be no stop to this issue if something is not done now. However, there is hope. In recent years, this issue has been noticed, and some small groups have started to take action. For example, in 2020, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime began hosting the Line Up Live Up Global Initiative. This movement is meant to help promote the use of sports as a way to teach kids and teens who have committed crimes in the past a variety of skills to help better their future life and choices. In a recent documentary, the leader of this organization had this to say about the program.
Line Up Live Up is a guide. It can provide a certain avenue and way to engage young people. This is how we get people to come to an intervention. And then when they're there, we try to use the sport in an intentional way to facilitate discussion around important life skills.
Não é preciso sair daqui campeão olímpico. Ele tem que ser campeão da vida.
Although this program does exist, it is one of very few that is tackling this issue. The spread of the crimes is outpacing these movements at an alarming rate. The problem is much bigger than most people realize. We have to start small by doing things such as informing others of this issue and starting other small groups like the United Nations office. We can overcome this, and we can repair the purity in the sports world that we once had. But I can't do it alone. It will take each and every one of you to help make this happen. Thank you for watching.